Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another Historical Humans Reacts. And on today's episode, we have a historical society in Maryland that eventually uncovered the mystery of a 100-year-old contraption that they had discovered in their collections. The Dorchester County Historical Society in Maryland were baffled by this unusual machine that they located along with their collections. And unsure of the purpose of it, they reached out, like anyone does, to social media to see if people had answers. And boy, oh boy, did they.
Yep. Yeah. This object has been sitting in the Historical Society's collection since the 90s, when it was donated to them, and it's sort of been left in there, forgotten as this thing. They didn't really know what it was, but it was clearly some sort of historical artifact.
It was old,
And
that's for sure.
yeah, one of the one of the things that they looked into is the motor is relatively modern, but all the other pieces of the equipment are over 100 years old. So the motor failed at some point in its history, was replaced with a more modern version, and the old machine kept chugging until you know people no longer had a use for it, and it wound up at this museum.
Yeah, and what it ended up being, what it did turn out to be, is called a beaten biscuit maker, which is a specific kind of food that's made in the Deep South and was quite popular and prominent in the 1800s when this is, or the, what is this, early 20th century?
This would have been early 1900s here.
Yeah, it's about 100 years old. But it poses a very interesting issue and a very interesting dilemma where a lot of these institutions, a lot of these small historical societies, county museums, etc., have a pretty large issue that stems and that comes where a lot of their staff are aging out or unfortunately passing away while in these roles. And unfortunately, the preservation practices and the collecting practices have changed a lot in the past 100 years, where now we keep catalogs, we have accession documents, decession documents, where we're able to track the life cycle of an artifact. Well, unfortunately, a lot of county institutions or small time institutions, a lot of times that was just old Bob. Bob remembered everything. Bob knew everything. If you had a question, you could ask Bob. Well, when Bob retires or passes away, all that information is just lost, and that is almost exactly what happens here. They were talking about how a lot of their staff had actually left in the past few years, so they had this lull in knowledge. And one of the things this article actually does highlight is the fact that they are going through and trying to make amends and basically accession everything and keep everything.
Yeah, they keep everything cataloged. And one of the key things with this that they were lucky that they were able to do after people on social media helped them identify what this object was number one, they were able to confirm the theory of it being a beaten biscuit maker, because the area that they're in was used to be home to a beaten biscuit bakery. It used to be home to a major manufacturer of that food stuff. And the other key thing that really helped them, this is where they got very, very lucky, is they were able to locate the man who originally dropped the machine off at their doorstep. And he was able to confirm that, yes, this is the machine I dropped off at your door. Yes, it is this object. He was able to confirm everything. So that's something you rarely get to do, especially with what this essentially was, which was an orphaned collection.
And what's kind of cool about this in particular is they later did research and ended up finding out that this specific machine was developed by a man to assist his, I think it said his aunt, with making those beaten biscuits. And this machine with all the nodules would effectively knock the air out of the bread, and the bread would not really rise much naturally because there wasn't a leavening agent in it. So a lot of times it kept that depressed look and that it had a very flaky texture, and they would accompany this with root vegetables as well. So it's kind of an interesting look at the food culture of this time period and what these people would actually eat. And this is a really cool artifact, but I think it highlights that issue that a lot of collections, a lot of institutions have things in their collections they have no idea about because they were orphan collections or that they were just dropped off on their doorstep, and it leads to a lot of issues for people trying to go back and sort through it and figure things out. And we've talked about it a lot on other episodes, but we're currently going through a curation crisis where there's not enough room to store every artifact in every single place, and we're actively running out of space. And then you have a lot of things like this where this is a big machine. This takes up a lot of space, and in some of the archives and institutions I've worked for, we've had entire separate rooms just dedicated to large objects, large machinery. It's just kind of interesting to see how this happens, really.
And on the other end of it, this machine was a really useful invention for its time, because the traditional way of making these biscuits is incredibly horrible for the person baking them. What you would have to do without this machine, like, I know it's like a pivot here, but like, you know, like this is 2 points. It's the curation crisis, and then what is this? Without this machine, you would sit the dough on a tree stump and beat it with the flat of an axe or with a hammer for several hours in order to get rid of the air pockets to keep it dense, to pack it tight enough.
And to really make it that flaky puff pastry kind of taste and feel.
Yeah, it was a really bad job to have. It was very, very labor intensive to make even one of these. So this machine would effectively have been a godsend of its time.
And it's also just kind of cool too, because for the time period, this is one of the earliest machines, and to see how machines were adapted for uses like that is kind of cool. It gives you a good insight into where a lot of thought process was at the time, especially for the gentleman who invented this, to save that labor, to save that time, to save that effort, and to build a machine that's able to do that job on your behalf is, quite frankly, a really cool innovation.
Yeah, it's a very fun thing to have. The society got very lucky in that they were able to recover all the information about this device.
Yeah.
That unfortunately doesn't always happen.
So it's kind of cool. It's very interesting. And they were able to corroborate it and do more research to confirm their theory. So this is kind of just a nice little update. Something you don't always hear about, but it's a cool little connection. And quite frankly, I think that's actually a great point for us to wrap up on today's episode. Just talking about something kind of funky that came through the pipeline, but is really relevant in our historic world today. Yeah. But if you guys enjoyed watching, let us know down below, and we will see you guys in the next video. Peace.